I am Eric Cast. I'm the community manager here at Establish, the power behind Startup of the Year. For those of you who are new to our events, Establish is a consultancy that works with a diverse range of organizations to help them develop and implement innovative strategies, startup ecosystem engagement, and product event strategy and production. Our most known program is Startup of the Year, which is a community, a resource, and awards program focused on supporting and elevating early stage founders. Today's event is the first in a new series that we've put together for you called Grow Your Startup. This event has been specially curated to discuss something that all startups are going to eventually have to do: pitch decks. All right, create your pitch deck, revise your pitch deck. You're all going to have to do this at one point or another. So we here at Establish want to make sure you are set up for success at every turn in your journey of building your great companies. At the end of the event, we'll do a randomized drawing for 2 audience members to receive a pitch deck review from Frank Gruber and the Establish team. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our featured speaker for today, our fearless co-founder and co-CEO, Frank Gruber.
Hello, how's it going, everybody? Hope you're having a good day. I'm really appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to share this topic with you. I'm going to first share my screen so you've got something to look at besides just me talking, and then we'll get rolling here. All right, hopefully you can see that clearly, and here we go. All right, so a little bit about myself and why you should be listening to me when I'm telling you what should be in a pitch deck. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Established, and we, as Eric mentioned, work with a lot of different organizations, and we obviously run the Startup of the Year program and community. I'm also come from a product development background, so worked at some big corporations building products for millions of people. Was an early blogger and journalist for 15 plus years. Saw a lot of startups, a lot of new technologies, written about thousands of them. Been pitched a million times by different startup founders. Was also a founder of multiple companies and ultimately raised funds for one of them, and eventually had that company acquired. It was actually a media company, so in that saw lots of pitches, but also got to prep my own pitch deck to raise funds. So kind of done a lot of different things there. Also wrote a book about starting up called Startup Mixology. If you don't have a copy, they're still out there in the wild. You can go grab one. Got a whole section about pitching and telling your story, which is kind of similar to what we're going to be talking about today. And so, thousands of pitches have come my way in various forms and with various intents, from being pitched for media. As an entrepreneur, I pitched myself. As a product person, I was being pitched to either leverage their product or have their product acquired by a corporation I worked for. And then obviously as an investor, I've been investing since 2012, first as an angel and now as an LP and venture partner, as well as spinning up some SPVs for Startup of the Year community companies. So seen a lot of great pitches, seen a lot of mistakes made as well. And I'm going to share my learnings today for you. And hopefully you learn something and take at least one thing away from it today, because you're here with us and I appreciate it. All right, so also want to mention, little caveat, if this is advice, you don't have to listen to what I'm saying. There's lots of ways to do this, and actually I've seen a lot of them, and I've kind of tried to make this actually be a hybrid so you can see kind of everything that you could potentially do for your pitch deck. All right, a little bit of history. We got to get started with a little history here about the pitch, and this is brief history. There's probably quite a book's probably written about this, but the origins of the first pitch. I was trying to think, where did they first start pitching? And it may have even gone further back than this, but I thought, well, the idea of pitching probably came from early when the explorers were going out and pitching wealthy individuals to sail off into the sunset and looking for new land and potentially treasure and other things. But that's kind of my first thoughts. And then more recently there was the founder of a company called America Research Development, George Duras. He was actually the kind of the person that actually has been kind of pegged as the first venture capitalist. He started ARD, and they invested in over 150 companies. And most notably, they invested in DEC, which kind of led to the microcomputing revolution. But they put in 70,000 and got out about 38 million about 10 years later. And this is in the 40s and 50s. And so that obviously led to us doing what we're doing today, pitching for investment dollars. And so now you have the history. Let's talk about the purpose of this potential pitch. It could vary. I mean, in most cases, you're probably pitching for the ability to find investors. In other cases, it could be partnerships. But either way, really what you're trying to do is tell your story and articulate what you're doing and boil it down so that you can take whatever it is you're thinking or your vision and encapsulate it into just a few slides and thoughts, kind of get people on the same page and get them obviously excited about what you're doing. So your goal may, like I mentioned, vary depending upon what you're trying to do. But ultimately, this is like your calling card to get into the next meeting if you're trying to get an investor on board, right? Or maybe even make a partnership. It's literally something they're going to ask for as the first thing they're going to ask for is like, can I get a deck or a executive summary? And so you're going to want to have this ready to go so that when that happens, you can send it right away and it's not like weeks later, because this is a process and it could take several weeks to pull this all together because you're literally thinking about every component of your project or company and trying to project what is this going to do in 3 to 5 years. So what's your goal is really about like figuring out what needs to go in there, but really your goal for this pitch is to get to that next meeting, make additional connections, potentially raise funds. Oops, other way, here we go. All right, so I kind of would like to start this with like this one sentence pitch. This will help you kind of boil down what you're doing to just one sentence. It's a pretty good exercise because you could use it over and over again in different ways. So let's say your company is, this is the way kind of you can kind of formulate it is, my company, insert name of the company, is developing a defining offering to help define a defined audience solve a problem with secret sauce, which will make it happen. So let's say it's my company. I'm going to create a robot company. It's going to be called RoboFrank, and it's developing a personal robot to help anyone clean up their dwelling in one click of a button, thanks to a proprietary AI algorithm. That's my one sentence pitch for the company I just made up. Now let's try to condense that even further into a one-liner. So if you want to take that sentence, now you've got that sentence, you can just shorten it and you can condense it just to one-liner. And so mine would be RoboFrank. You don't even need to say that part. Is one-click personal cleanup robots. That's what we're doing. And that's going to like ring and be really, be able to put on your front slide and be able to say really quickly to somebody if they ask, what are you doing? And you're not like, well, I'm trying to create an algorithm. You're not getting into the weeds. You're literally like, this is what I'm doing. This is the goal. And they'll get it quickly. All right. So a couple other things you need to do and think about when you are pitching. You need to know your audience. This is something that sometimes people forget to do because they're so thinking like about what they're doing and maybe you don't realize who they're talking to. So make sure that you're doing your research around whoever it is you're talking to, and you can then cater your deck to that person or group. In many cases, you need to look for their background information. So like for pitching an investment group, what do they invest in? What is their background? Who are the actual people you're talking to, and what do they care about? You can even look at their social streams. There's so much information out there now that didn't exist back in the day. You can actually go out there and find information about people and pull together a pretty good executive summary of who you're talking to every single time you're going to talk to somebody, so you're ready to go beforehand. It'll make you actually more calm because you know a lot about these people you're going to talk to. And then also, what does this firm focus on? Are they focused on the early stage? Are they focused on the later stage? That's the kind of stuff that you're going to want to know and not make the mistake of pitching a later stage investor for your seed round funding. And so we've all kind of, when you're first getting started, don't realize that there's lots of different types of investors. And so maybe you're not going to want to pitch like a later stage or even an early stage investor when you really need an angel check, right? So I think it's something you kind of have to think about, like who you're talking to, know your audience, and then go from there. It'll help you. All right. So one other thing, kind of lesson learned, just from my own experience as well, is like everything, and we can kind of reiterate it with some of the things around the internet, but more or less anything you're sharing in a pitch deck, just expect to be passed along to somebody else because they're going to share it with the rest of their colleagues, probably to take a look at. Those colleagues know other people. They may share it with another, friend that's at a different firm. And so just expect your pitch deck to get passed along. And it may not always be passed to the people you want. Maybe they found there's a company that they invested in similar to yours and like, oh, let's send that to this company that we're invested in that's very similar. So it could end up in the hands of other people, potentially even your competitors. So think about that when you're writing it up. It's not, you don't want to like not share everything you need to share, but think about like what would you want to put on the internet. And so the reason I say that is like, if you go search for like, Uber's first pitch deck or Airbnb's first pitch deck, and I'll show you some of those examples here shortly, you're going to see them. They're out there on the internet. And I don't know, when you're thinking about what you're doing, maybe you're not thinking that far in advance, but if you build something that's super compelling and you can grow it to that level, it could end up on the internet even. All right, so one of the key things here as well, before I kind of dive into the slide formation and what that looks like and structure, is really telling your story. It's such an important thing. And so if you can't tell your story yourself, then who is, right? Who's going to be able to, right? So I think if you're able to tell your story and do it in a compelling way, you're going to help build an emotional connection with that person. And if you can't physically do it because like you just aren't a good speaker or you aren't good at telling your story, maybe pull somebody in from your team that's maybe another part of your co-founding team that can tell the story in a better way, and that'll actually push you further. And it's nothing against you. Maybe you're really good at the other components. So just think about that as you're kind of formulating this pitch, because your audience really, you want to build some kind of connection with them early, and you can use this story once you kind of come up with what that might be to really hook them in early and keep them throughout the pitch, and obviously bring it back in the end. And stories are super powerful, right? That's really how we learn things, is by telling stories. So I think it's a really important and sometimes understated thing that goes into pitching, and you got to kind of come up with what your story is. And obviously you're not making it up, but you want to make sure that your story is compelling, and you think about the things that people would care about when you're telling that story. And a lot of times, it's a personal reason that you started the company, or it's like, something you saw in the world you wanted to change because of, some impact that you saw that you didn't like. I mean, there's definitely a lot of different ways to tell that story, and you just got to dig deep and figure out what that is. All right, now we're gonna get to the fun part. Well, I don't know if it's the fun part, but we're gonna get to the next part, which is the pitch deck. And we're gonna talk about the different kinds of pitches. So there's a lot of information out there. Guy Kawasaki for years was like the staple kind of person that you listen to about, how many slides you need a pitch deck. And he would always say 10. 10 is what you need, and don't do any more, none less. And I would, that's a good start. You can definitely do 10. I've seen great pitches that are 10 with not a whole lot of words and a lot of just, pictures and things like that kind of draw attention. But I think there's an opportunity to have more if you want, right? Like if you want to have 16 slides, I'm going to lay out all the various slides. And if you want to roll a couple of them into one slide, that's fine too. But either way, I wanted to lay it out in the long format here, and you can condense down to 10 if you'd like, and just tell the story about those slides. But if you don't want to do that, you can actually break it out and make it a little deeper. And some pitches are longer. I've even seen pitches that are 20-something slides, but usually that's for the later stages. The earliest stage, when you're just getting going, you probably could tell it in 10 to 15 slides, maybe 16. And if you're talking about the title and the thank you slide, you're really talking 14 slides. So we're gonna go through each slide now and give you some examples, and hopefully you can take some tidbits away that'll help you with your next pitch deck. All right, so start out with the title slide. Pretty self-explanatory, but I've seen lots of people make mistakes on the title slide by using their beautiful new logo that doesn't have an actual name in it. So they'll put this amazing logo that's got like everything kind of working in it there that could resemble that company, but it doesn't actually say the name of the company. So if you do that and you've got a logo that's like that, make sure you put the name of the company near it or by it so that you know what company you're talking about. And then obviously that one-liner that we created earlier, you can then throw in there right under that. And now people are immediately going to kind of set their heads and expectations like what this is by just looking at that picture or logo, the name of the company, and the one-liner, and they should understand what you're going to be talking about. It helps, especially if you see a lot of, if you're an investor that sees a lot of pitches, you kind of need that little jolt of understanding before you dive right into a new topic. And then the other thing is, you don't have to do this, but I encourage it. Put your presenter, whoever's presenting, their name or the founder's names or something like that on there, as well as an email address or contact information. It doesn't have to be your direct information. It could be like an info at or a contact, us or whatever, but something to be able to get in contact with you if somebody wants to follow up. I've also seen people put phone numbers on there. That's up to you and your discretion if you want to disclose that or not. Again, like I said, it could end up on the internet. All right, so that's kind of the title slide. Here's an example of an older title slide. I found this the other day. I was like, this is awesome. It's I don't know if you're familiar with Foursquare or not, but they pitched in 2009 and raised some funds from some really notable people. It was once valued at 1.1 billion before it was split into a couple companies. and they raised over almost $400 million over 9 rounds of funding. So pretty good at pitching. This was their first ever, I think, pitch in like back in the day. And Dennis Crawley was the founder. He had his information on there and the date and their logo. And their logo happened to have their name in it, which is helpful. If it didn't, I would say put their name here, right? All right, moving along, we're going to the problem. What are you trying to solve? What is this company trying to do? The best pitches that I've seen have done it with an opening story, as I mentioned earlier. So create that story. What is the story you're trying to share? And if you can just start with a story that explains the problem, you've now taken out this slide pretty quickly, and you captured the attention of your audience and created that emotional connection that you're trying to get to. And ultimately, you're trying to explain why people should care about what you're doing. Maybe it's to save the puppies, or maybe to clean the ocean, or maybe it's to just do something really simple. I mean, it doesn't have to be all those bigger, grandiose things, but just explain why it matters to you and why it impacts others. And I think it'll help be a hook for others that are listening. Good example here. This is one that has to do with email. It's SendGrid. And they were doing talking about some of the problems that they encounter with transactional email, and they just laid them out pretty basic. Pretty simple slide, not a whole lot on it. Just a guy that is really struggling with something and talking about the problems with email. They ended up using this deck to raise $750K of their seed round, and they sold to Twilio a while later for $2 billion with $3 billion in stock, in stock with $3 billion valuation. So it worked, but again, this is a pretty simple slide and explains the problem. I'm certain that they have talking points that didn't just say deliverability, scalability, so they've got a story around this, and why this is a problem, and probably told the story of the guy sitting in that chair with his computer, so think about that. It's not just what's on the slides, it's what you say as well that matters. So, while the slides will help be a crutch, and will be a great crutch when you're just sending it an email, but think about what your story is going to be behind the scenes when you're creating these as well. All right, next up, we've got slide 3, the value proposition. Now you've made the audience aware of what you're doing. It's important to now figure out how your solution is going to solve it. So be clear and make the audience want to know more about how you're going to create value in the world with what you're doing. A good one I found that's an example is Mixpanel. If you're not familiar with them, they raised 65 million from Andreessen Horowitz, and they're an analytics software product. And so their solution is right here. It's pretty simple what they laid out. It's just they said what their solution does, and I'm sure they had a talking point around that. So you don't have to throw a picture on there. You could throw an image on there, but you could just say what you're doing and why it's important. All right, market validation. So this is where like a couple of these things could be combined, like the last 2 slides, 3 and 4, could be combined into one slide. So you're sharing what you're doing. You could also validate the market at the same time. And so that's where you could end up with like 10 slides instead of 16 or whatever. All right, so you're sharing along what this is. So you're basically, be very clear with the audience, so they want to know more about this market and how validate the market and why the problem, why your solution is going to solve this existing problem. And so, like I said, it doesn't have to be doesn't need to be in there, but it could help if you roll it into the actual previous slide. So Airbnb, this is their original slide deck when they were called Air Bed and Breakfast, if you remember that. If not, that's okay. And basically, they just put their market validation and laid out some numbers, and it's pretty simple and clean, and talk to those numbers. So you could do something like this, talking about in their situations about temporary housing, showing what the problem might be and how you're kind of validating that market as an opportunity. And then similarly, like, oh, look at all these listings that happen on Craigslist. That's another thing showing that there's like opportunity here for us to like do something really interesting. All right, so let's keep going here. Market size, again, this is important because the little light bulb is going to go on, or the little wheels will be turning in every investor as you're talking about market size. So how big is this market going to be that you're going after? That's what you're trying to tell here. Seems pretty straightforward, but it's important because the minute you start sharing this kind of information, first off, it has to be kind of like real, and you can't just make it up. But the wheels will be going on in any investor's head about, okay, how do I like how do I take this, whatever this market size is, and get a fraction of it? And just a fraction of it, what would that be, right? Like, what's 1% of that? What's 2% of that market? Like, what does that look like from a revenue perspective or whatever from what you're doing? And so that's kind of what this will share, and hopefully get them excited about the opportunity. And so one way you can do it, and I've seen a lot of different ways to do it, but you see, like, okay, there's some data about this year, right? This year was this market size, and projecting out in 2025 or 2026, the market's going to be this for, Frank's robot, or Robo Frank, that's going to be, robots. Let's just say robots in general. So our previous example was about a robot. That's what that's what it's going to be at that point. So you kind of could say, okay, there's only 10 robots now, but in 2026, everyone's going to have 10 of them, right? So, or something like that. So in your head, you're like, well, if I could get one of those 10 robots to be purchased, because it's my robot or whatever, that's a win. And what does that look like? So that's the kind of thing you're trying to do with this market size slide. Here's an old one, but Uber Cab, when they were called Uber Cab instead of just Uber, they kind of talked about the overall market as $4.2 billion annually and growing. And then they explained how is that broken down with the top 4 players, and kind of illustrates that there's a huge opportunity for Uber. And they seem to have struck that one pretty good. So, all right, competitive analysis. Let's keep going here. So I want to keep moving. I know we've got a tight timeline today. Your audience wants to know. Well, so I've seen a lot of pitches where literally a startup founder will say there is no competition and be really adamant about it. And I was just like, really? There's no competition at all? Like, in the entire, there's always something competing for at least attention. So it's really the case there's no competition. There's, it does happen every so often with something super new and groundbreaking. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about social related things on the web, there's like a lot of things are competing for your attention, and maybe things offline that are competing for your attention. So I'm just trying to think about what are the things that are competing for this audience in different ways, and show that, share what who those competitors are, because at the end of the day, you'd like to talk about that pretty openly, and then talk about how your solution is better, how it's going to make lives easier, how it's going to save puppies or whatever it's going to do, and just be really clear and honest about how your solution is better. And this slide actually could be combined with the next we're going to talk about. But here's a competition slide you've seen this kind of access before in a lot of different slide decks. That kind of shares the different types of competitors and how they all lay in the landscape. And so this is where Airbnb put themselves up into the affordable but online transactions, and that's next to hostel.com. And hotels.com wasn't doing similar rental kind of things yet. Airbnb was, and then these other two, Craigslist was doing mostly offline transactions where you have to meet them, but they were affordable. And then you've got the kind of like more expensive offline-ish kind of people with VRBO and whatnot. So definitely it was competition, right? If you saw this, you'd be like, oh wow, there's tons of competition, but they're kind of carving their own niche into this one area. And that's, if you can explain how you're doing that in a really great way, these types of accesses work. There's other ways to do it as well, but it could really clear out how there's an opportunity here. So obviously, familiar with Airbnb, their valuation IPO was over $4 billion, and took a hit during COVID, but have been bouncing back as people are now starting to work from anywhere and using Airbnb. So it's all coming back around. All right, so that last slide and this slide could be combined if you'd like to tighten it up and just talk to it. So competitive advantage is, what's the unique advantage over the competition? So how are you going to be better than them? Are you cheaper, faster, better technology, current, better than current solutions? What is it that makes you have a better situation than what is currently available? Or maybe it's even not even that. Maybe it's like how you're attacking it, right? So that could be another way to do it. So here's a competitive advantage slide that talks about all the different various. Well, this one's actually blank, but you can kind of see how it would look if you did lay it out. This is Airbnb's. All right, so we'll go on to business model. Got to figure out how you're going to make money. That's kind of what this is about. So basically, early stage, you may not have to do this as much. And it's interesting because as you continue to progress, you're going to actually have actuals. And so it's important to know how to portray those and put those onto a slide deck. So early on, it's literally we're at 0, and we're going to go to we're going to sell these things or whatever it is, the robots, and we're going to go hopefully in a hockey stick format up, right? And then you can project that out over 5 years, 3 to 5 years, and see where that's at, and maybe in 10 years or whatever. And with this funding, it's going to help keep it going or whatever. So that's kind of what my business model for it is ultimately. I'm talking about traction too here a little bit, get a little ahead of myself, but more or less, it's you just sell robots, right? So what's your business model? Is it to sell robots, or is it to book Airbnb style hotel rooms, or is it to people's places, or is it to have a great I don't know, food delivered to you, or what is it? What are you trying to do? And so talk about that model and how you take a percentage of that or create revenue from that. And who you're targeting as customers, who how much will they pay for this, like how many can you sell, like that kind of stuff. So talk through all that, and ultimately it should help solidify in the brains of whoever's listening how this is going to work out, and hopefully turn into something big. All right, so here's the revenue model for, and I should mention, you don't have to have it nailed. Like if you're new and early, you could have a couple of streams, and that's why I just wanted to show this slide, especially in media. So I had a media company called Tech.co for a while, over 10 years, and ultimately we had lots of different types of revenue that came in, kind of similar to this. But the key is just to hone in on the ones that are the most you want to focus on, especially if you're early. Like make sure that you figure out, okay, here's the one we're really diving into, but we have these other streams too that are more passive. And that way, you can kind of make it clear for the investor or whoever you're pitching to that you're really focusing, doubling down in this area. So this is kind of the revenue model, BuzzFeed. And I have also heard like people say, oh, we've got 10 different revenue models, and of course, or business models. And so, like again, just focus on the couple or one or two that you think is going to be the most lucrative, and it might not be right, but at least you've got something that you're getting behind, and you can always change it over time if you need to. All right, so what's your go-to-market strategy? That's slide 9, and your customer acquisition. So how are you gonna actually find customers? Like, what's your strategy to get those customers to pay you for whatever it is you're doing? This is where you lay it out. How are you gonna reach them? Do you have a partnership strategy? Do you have some other kind of strategy? Is it direct to consumer? Like, are you working through other businesses? Like, what is the strategy? And how are you ahead, or what have you done so far? And what are some advantages potentially that you've got to get that strategy out there? Here's a go-to-market strategy for Pendo. These are all, by the way, most of these companies are unicorns or were unicorns at some point. So here's another one, Pendo. This is their slide from their early pitch deck. So their go-to-market was direct, mostly inside sales team, and then they've got some current B2B web-based businesses as well, and then there's their current target customer, and the persona is product management people, and the price is monthly active users per product. So really laid it out pretty simple. That was their main way that they were going to generate revenue, and it kind of solidified in the brains of everyone listening that this is how they're going to make money and how they're going to get out there right away. All right. So next up, management team, and sometimes this slide can be bumped up to the top depending upon who the team is, or how you want to play it. But if you're telling a story about the team, and it's like a story about like something that happened to you or something that happened to one of your co-founders, you might want to bubble the team slide up to the beginning and talk about the team, right? Because it seems like a clear time to bring it up. But you don't have to. You could wait till later. But it shows the strength. A lot of people invest in team, right, and what they've done, and where if they believe that this team could do this because they've got good pedigree, or they've got good network, or they've had other successes. Like, there's a lot of different reasons. They maybe led big companies or whatever. So this is where you kind of share all that information in a way that shows that you've got the ability to do what you're trying to do. You can also include advisors on this, which is a nice way to include others that support what you're doing and have maybe been helping you along the way. If you're a larger team, you can focus on just the leadership and not the entire, obviously, team and those key players. And one other thing you could do is say, those mystery people that you're going to hire on there too, is like, we're trying to hire a CTO. Well, this is, that's what we're going to do once we, get this funding or whatever, this partnership or whatever you're trying to do. And so you could put the headcount on there too, if there's open headcount and you think it's going to be something that's in question. All right, so here's an example of a pretty well-known leadership team from WeWork, and it's a little blurry because their stuff was blurry for some reason on the internet. But yeah, there's the CEO, just kind of faces and what they're doing and some of their backgrounds. And then a board of directors. This could be a board, group of advisors at the below. But these are the kind of key 6 players that were running the company. All right, so projections and key metrics. Okay, so this is that 3 to 5 year projection, and it's financials, and it's showing like the kind of nitty gritty of how this is going to work. And it should help share like the projection of what this company is going to do in that time. And obviously investors want to see that hockey stick, as I mentioned earlier. It doesn't have to be a hockey stick if you're early and you're just getting going, but you just need to figure out what are the things that are actual traction that show growth. And it could be users. It doesn't have to be paying users. It could be, there's a lot of different ways to show it. So I think don't get caught up on that if you don't have it. It doesn't have to be strictly financial to begin with. Eventually, you want to turn some of those people into some kind of financial result, but it doesn't have to be at the beginning if you're early stage. So be thinking about that, how you want to portray it if you're early on. It might be that you start with like a test case, like we just rolled out a beta and we've got 10,000 users and they're all doing this and this is what it looks like, and we then shut it off because we wanted to get more funds in the door to kind of grow and be able to handle the growth. So just tell your story that way, like figure out what the right way to show it is, but ultimately you can create your own little use cases about projections and growth if you don't have any. So that is one way to play it if you haven't launched and have millions of users and that are paying you or whatever. All right, so and also just be obviously you can't, this has got to be real financials. Projections don't, but they're based off of real financials. So this is where you can get into trouble if you aren't being honest. So be as honest as you can. Obviously, we know some of these projections aren't going to be right because you're not a fortune teller. So just do it the best you can. And what you can do is do it all in like spreadsheets and things, and you save those and use those if they ever ask for additional information. You've got those of like how you came to do this and with this financial model that you pulled together. But this is one from Mint, which is a throwback. They were acquired by Intuit in 2009, but they pitched in like, I think they won like one of the first TechCrunch events that was out there in the Bay Area, and had some pretty noteworthy investors, and then raised some more money and ended up getting acquired. And this was their financial slide from an early pitch, and they basically looking at what they were doing, and they projected out until 2010. So this is from 2007 to 2010, and it shows some of those hockey sticks kind of situations and some growth, which is what everyone wants to see. And was pretty transparent about their financials, which you don't have to be 100% transparent if you don't want to. They just happen to be because they had good numbers. If you don't and you're trying to just get it going, let's figure out a way that you can show growth without showing everything in the kitchen sink. All right, current status and traction. So similar, they just showed, so that slide and this slide could be combined, the last slide. So again, you can condense and turn it into a 10-slide deck. But it just depends how much you want to put out on the slide versus how much you want to talk to. And so, yeah, traction is important. It's one of the main things that investors look for if they're not like first check-in kind of people that, just then they're investing in the founders more or less, and the trust that they have in those founders to do what they're saying they're going to do. Or in a market, some cases they're investing in a market thinking, okay, I'm going to throw investments into these different things in that market, and one of them's going to hit, that kind of thing. So there's different strategies, obviously, from an investment perspective, but if you have traction, it's usually a good thing to show. And so investors want to, see that momentum forward, and and that way they can see the progression of the business. And but it starts with where you are currently and where you want to go. And it was a good, good indication here with these financials. So it's kind of, you see how it can go hand in hand with financials if you'd like. And here's some revenue sources here and expected earnings. So it doesn't have to be based on that. It could be based on other things. So here's an example of traction for Buffer. Now I like this slide because it's clever, right? So they've got all the information you want to see about the growth of the users and growth of 40% month over month. Now they also have a growing hockey stick, which I don't know if that's actually their hockey stick or just a hockey stick to show you that hockey stick growth, which I think is the clever part. So it's not really clear because it's just on a blank background. But either way, you've got the hockey stick, and as an investor, you're like, oh, they've got a hockey stick, and they read this and like, oh, they must be. So maybe it just like tricks your brain into thinking that you've got this this hockey stick. But they did have really good growth and good margins and things too. So anyway, it's something I thought caught my attention because like, oh, that's a clever way to get the hockey stick in there, even if you don't want to show all these numbers on a hockey stick kind of chart. All right, so moving along, almost there. We're slide 13, which is timeline and milestones. So what do you have planned? What have you done? What do you have planned in the future? And what are those milestones you're trying to achieve? And this is actually interesting because it'll help you kind of also talk to like why you're trying to raise. And again, you could talk about this a little bit later when you're talking about use of funds. But it's, so again, a couple more consolidations, but I wanted to show you all the variations of different slides you could put together if you went the long way. So future strength of your current status and traction by showing, plans of world domination. What are you going to do to get to, a unicorn status if that's what you're trying to do, or an IPO, or whatever you're trying to do, or maybe it's just an acquisition or a partnership or whatever. So what is that march to get there, and lay it out, pretty simply for folks to understand. It doesn't have to be on a graph or chart either. It could just be like written down. Here's Uber Cabs progress to date, which is pretty clear. They reserved ubercab.com, which is funny because they don't use it anymore. They also reserved Uber Cab SMS code, which they don't use anymore. They talked about how they filed some trademarks around it. They built an app. They created a bank account. So simple stuff. Like they're just knocking these things out. Like we've got this stuff under control. They have 5 advisors, which is a good kind of mark, and then they've got 15 clients and they're recruiting, and then they've got some patents in the works. Next, they're going to buy 3 cars, develop the app with a February 1st demo, and then raise a few million, have a small office in the GM in San Francisco. So that was the next step and hurdle in their milestones. But it's pretty straightforward and kind of off the cuff. It's not like in a big chart or anything that made it really simple for someone to read and say, oh, I get it, what they're doing next. Makes sense. So they combine the traction, milestone, and timeline all in one bullet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet points, which is another way to do it. All right, so the ask. So it's funny, you don't necessarily have to put it in the slide deck, but I would advise it if you are trying to raise funds. That way they've got it and they're not searching for it. And sometimes you don't see it indexed because it varies based on who they're talking to. But anyway, the whole reason, obviously, you just did those first few slides, if you're up to 13 now, is basically to share what you're, share what you're doing to get people excited about it so that they could get behind it with whatever you're trying to ask for. So in this case, it might be raising money. So we're raising, X million to, help build this fund, or basically to help build the Frank Robo Frank to be, able to get to the next level, which is creating 4 prototypes or something like that, right? So it's just, what are you trying to do? What are you going to use the money for? And what's the goal? And that's what you're kind of laying out here. And that's in your ask. And it's just in the slide. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy. Here's an example from a company called Intercom, and they raised $600,000 in 2011 with this ask in a pitch deck. And so they were just raising a convertible note. It's 18 months of runway to work on, and they're doing product market fit. And so these are the things they're looking for in doing so, and they plan to raise additional rounds later. So be really clear and transparent about what you're trying to do, how this is going to get you to X, and then there's another hurdle coming up, and you're on the treadmill to continue to grow. So that's kind of a great way to put it. Again, this is a few bullet points, right? Not too much put into this. 3 bullet points and some sub points, and it raised them $600K. All right, so I think they said it. Yeah, so they put their others to the next slide. So they've got the ask and the use of funds in that last slide, because their ask was, for the convertible note, and then this is what we're going to do with it, and then after that we're going to do more. So you could do the same thing. You could combine those last 2 slides, the ask and the use of funds, together, and see how that's going to work out. And a lot of people do. So you don't need necessarily those 2 slides. You can do it as one. And you're just trying to show anybody, like, how is this investor going to turn like their $1 they invest into 10? Like that's what you're trying to show, and show that progression. And you're doing that throughout, like with the various different components, like the market size and the traction and the financials and all that. But again, this is your last point to try to reiterate why that is going to happen. And so, and get them, to be obviously excited about that. All right, so here's Monzo is another company that raised, and it's a financial company. So of course they put it in just text and paragraph format. But talked about what they're trying to do in bold, right? They're trying to expand it into Europe and US and Asia. So you can read the paragraph if you want, it's a little blurry, but it talks about all the various things they're trying to do with that funding. All right, and the last slide it's just a thank you slide with more contact information. It's very similar to the title slide. It's got your one-liner on it. It's got a thank you, and obviously your email address and potentially phone number if you're comfortable in sharing that. And again, remember, this could be shared on the internet. So when you're sharing this, make sure you're thinking about that. So if you want to create like an info at instead of your own personal email address, that's fine too, as long as it goes to you and maybe a couple people on your team. So that way you don't miss it when all these investors flock to invest in your company. And that's really it there. I don't have an example for that. I thought it was pretty straightforward. And there's a bonus. So now that you're done with all those slides, you can create an appendix. And it's super important that you do this because there's going to be questions, and you're going to encounter questions. This whole process is literally like a soul searching, what are we trying to do? How are we going to do it kind of process. So like in that process, you're going to come up with slides you don't even need or use, but it'll help answer questions that people are going to ask. So this is where you put them in the appendix. Save all the slides as you're creating this that you don't use, put them in the appendix and save them for later. And anytime anybody asks you a question that you don't have answered in your slides, create a slide for it and put it in the appendix. So next time you're ready. You're always going to be ready because you're doing this process. And so one other thing you can put in here that's very helpful is your financial model, like the full financial model. So you've got that in the appendix. You got all these different things that are going to help reiterate what you're doing in your appendix. So anytime anyone says like, what's this or that, you've got an answer for them. Oh, let me pull that up. And you pull the slide right up out of the appendix. And you don't have to share the appendix with them. This is more when you're pitching live. And that way, when you're pitching somebody in a room, you're always ready. It's like, oh, let me pull that slide up. And you've got an answer for their question before they really even thought that you'd be ready for it. So that's one way to do it. Oh, and if you don't have an answer, it's like, you know what? I don't have an answer for that, but I'm going to figure that out and get back to you. And then you spin that slide out and you get that out ready for next time, and you email them and let them know the answer as a follow-up. It's actually a good follow-up for even having a conversation with somebody. So if you don't, it's okay to say you don't know the answer right now, and just say I'll get back to you right away with that. It's a great point. All right, and thank you so much for listening. This is the I'm hoping you have amazing luck pitching. Hopefully these tips were helpful. And if you want to connect with me, just go to est.us/Frank Gruber. It's got a lot of different ways to connect there. Follow our other social at the start of the year and established. And we've got one more thing for you. So in leading up to this, we actually put a little giveaway together, and we're going to do a pitch deck review. So 2 attendees will be chosen randomly today, and they're going to get a chance for myself and some of our team members to do a pitch review of their deck. And so I've got to look over here real quick. The winners are, and if I can get a drum roll from all of you, I can't hear you, but I'll pretend it's there. Okay, so the first winner is, oh, I hope I don't mess this name up. It's Teresa Perzetti, and you are going to get a pitch deck review, so congratulations, that's gonna be great. And then the other winner is, let's see here. Let's see. Oh, sorry. The last one was Trisha. I think I may have said something wrong with that. Trisha Herzetti. So thank you for correcting me on that one in the chat here. And the other one is Alex Lazar. Is that correct? Alex Lazar. You're the other winner, and you'll be joining us for a pitch deck review. So we're excited about that, and we appreciate you entering the giveaway. So thanks for being a part of this this webinar. And for those of you not familiar with the community and just decided to show up here, we appreciate that too. So, but you can join our community. Just simply go to startupofyear.com. We have access to expert advice, mentoring, events, and kind of everything in between to help you on your startup journey. And today is the best day to start. Not tomorrow, not the next day. Get it going, get it started, and hopefully we can help you over at Established and Start the Year to kind of get to the next level with our various offerings. So thanks again for listening, and good luck pitching.
Thank you, Frank, for that wonderful presentation. There was one question in the audience, if you don't mind jumping back on. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do we
so
got?
this one is from Trisha Herzetti. Can you talk
Oh.
about how to balance what should be on the slide or speaker notes to make it compelling when it's only being read versus what to keep voiceover? So, you know, a reading set of slides versus a presentation set of slides.
Yeah, and that's a great question. Yeah, it's funny because some of those early, let me pull up this one. I want to show you the examples. Like this is a great example. This Monzo slide is a great example for a deck that's being shared in email only, right? Because you're not going to sit here and read this when you're presenting it and pitching it to someone live. So I think that's a great example of that. I don't know if you can still see my screen, but hopefully you can. And yeah,
No,
okay. Can you or no?
No, we cannot.
Okay, let me share it again. Here. There we go. All right, so yeah, so Monzo is a great example that was basically talking about use of funds, right? So they had kind of a paragraph format. I've seen something like this where it's literally like lots of different pages that have that information. You could put paragraphs like that in the notes if you literally lay out what you want them to come away with from that deck and from each slide. Because the problem you're going to run into is like if you're super simple, like this slide from Intercom is pretty basic, right? And talks about what we're looking for and lays it out pretty simply. But if you're like doing something like where was it? The Airbnb style, which was super simple. Let me go back. That's not it. It's all at the beginning. Where was it? Some of their first ones, like this slide, for example, competition. Well, a picture does help share it. You could talk more to it, right? That's one example of how you can talk more to it. Uber had a lot of detail in their slides on purpose, probably because they shared it around. So you kind of have to figure out, how do you want to do this? Do you want to put a lot of information in the slide itself, or do you want to be super basic, like with lots of pictures and not a lot of words? So there's two ways to do that pitch. If you're doing the way that the Airbnb went with, which was like not a lot of words on the pages, then yes, take the notes and put whatever you want to put in there that would help for that story. It also helps you when you're telling your story, right? Because anytime you write it out, you're going to then remember it better to be able to tell the story because it's not on the slide, so it's not going to cue you as much. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. But one other thing you can do that we didn't talk about today was do a executive summary too. So a lot of times, instead of doing the first pitch deck, somebody could ask you for an executive summary, which kind of lays out, and that's a whole nother kind of layout, but it lays out the various components in a one-pager. And so in doing so, you kind of condense all this stuff into a one-pager. And that would be another way to send it, that you could send it with that, the deck, and obviously it helps answer questions along the way because it's more paragraph format. Any other questions?
No, that's the only question we have. So essentially it's you kind of want to have almost two decks. You want to have a send ahead deck.
Oh yeah, I should mention you're going to have various forms of decks, and some are going to be, and they're going to cater to the people you're talking to too. So like, that's why you kind of need to know who your audience is when you're pitching, and you could tweak the deck slightly to show different various things for the different investors you're talking to, or example being like if there's one that you're going to that invests in robots that are early stage, and they are going to ask a lot of questions about robots, you might want to bulk that up. Like, why is your robot different? Because they know robots, right? So if you're not talking to somebody that knows robots, but they still invest generally in different kinds of companies, you may need to bulk up the part about education about robots versus like details in the weeds, details about how you're actually making the robots. Does that make sense? So really, in some cases, this deck is going to educate if they don't know anything about it. If they're generalists, if they're not, and they're focused very solely on what you're trying to do, then you don't need to do as much there. But yeah, I mean, if you can get it into a simple one deck to begin with, and then have variations off that, that's the way to kind of do it based off of who you're talking to. And also, as you pitch, you're going to get feedback, and you may tweak things along the way too, right? Like, okay, that didn't play as well as I thought it would. Like, I didn't get the expression I thought I would out of that. I've got to tweak this to make it a little more compelling, or get the point across better. Or maybe you get some feedback that there's confusion about certain components. that's when you go back to the drawing board on that one particular slide and try to change the way that's communicated so that it does a better job. It's a process. It's not done until you close your round, basically.
Okay, great. And also for the current economic situation that we have here going on in our country, have you seen anything that have you seen investors kind of how do I want to ask this? Have you seen a difference in how companies are pitching to investors?
Well, I mean, they're doing a lot more of it remotely versus being in the same room, right? Like that was what we saw with COVID. People are starting to move around again, but it hasn't gone away because people are ultimately creatures of habit, but also inherently lazy. Like they want to get more, not lazy, but they want to be more efficient, right? So you're seeing more pitches being done virtually than you did before. I'm trying to get to the last slide here. There we go. So yeah, so you're seeing a lot more people connect via Zoom, and a lot because you can get more calls in or whatever. You're not having to run around the country, and so because of that, the velocity investments for a while was very fast. You're seeing a little bit of a slowdown, but I'm seeing companies raising funds. So it's just a matter. Don't be discouraged by the timing of now. Just keep pushing forward, and you're gonna have to really have thick skin because you're gonna get a lot of no's. And it's not you. It could be that they're not investing. Their fund doesn't have any funds left, or they just did another investment they're busy with, or it's not the right timing for them. Like it's not about you, it's about them in many cases. Or maybe there's not interested in that technology, or they're scared about some component of what you're doing. Like there's a million reasons, right? Like if you're on the early stage investment side, like the angel side, it's even more personal. Like if you're talking about angel investors, well, I just invested in 5 companies, I got to slow it down, or my husband or wife is going to leave me, kind of thing, because they've just taken all of our personal wealth and invested. Like that kind of stuff even happens, which is kind of funny, but not really. It's not funny. It's terrible, but you know what I mean. Like there's definitely personal things that impact investments there. When you get more to the venture side, it's more about, okay, we've already drained fund 1, we're raising fund 2, and we're focused on that right now. We're not looking at more companies. That could be an example, right? Like, there's a lot of reasons, and it's not always you. Maybe we don't invest in companies that are in your area. We only invest in the Midwest, and you happen to be in the East or something. There's lots of different reasons. So don't give up. There's lots of investors. I think saw a number recently that the number of investors has grown 1,400 in the last just a couple of years, like 5 to 10 years, which is a lot more investors. And I don't know the exact clip that's at, but back in 10, 15 years ago, there were just handfuls of investors, and they were very coastal. So the landscape's changing, and it's actually creating more opportunity for everyone out there that's starting up.
Okay, great. And thank you for taking the time out today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Eric. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully you found this helpful, and good luck pitching.